Okay, I'm going live.
You ready?
Okay, I don't see it yet.
Just 1 second. So setting up your meeting for Facebook Live, and then it'll. Okay, we're good to go.
Oh, good. Okay.
Okay, we're going. Hey, gang, whoever tuned in, going to paint a little bit of Oregon for you today.
Hang on 1 second. We're just seeing the standby image. Oh, there you go. Thank you.
You ready? Do it again. Do it again. Hello. We're going to paint a little bit of kind of Central Oregon for you, about halfway between Portland and Eugene, a little town called Albany. And this is a morning walk that I took, and in the fall, it was cool and brisk. And so we're going to use it. I like the design of it, and that's the main reason I picked it. I'm going to try and deal with what we call color harmony and a little bit of underpainting that kind of comes through. So instead of using thick paint everywhere, we're going to try and keep some of the painting a little bit on the thin side. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find basically where I want that line is going to be somewhere in here. All right. And then we'll look kind of where the barn comes in. It's going to go about here. Oh, about here. And maybe a little over further. I don't know. And then I love the roof line. Right there. And we're just kind of sketching it loosely because I've mentioned this many, many times, but I'm transposing shapes to line, and often I'm wrong. And so knowing that I'm often wrong, do I like that angle? Do I like that opening? No, I don't. Let's make the opening more like that. It's narrower. Okay, that feels a lot better to me. Down, over, and then disappears. All right, so that's kind of where the barn's going to go. And then we kind of want to get basic tree shapes in there. There's going to be one in front of it. There's going to be a group back behind it, right in this area. Not that I need to know exactly now. And then we got some branches from a nice kind of looks almost like a pine, but it almost looks like a cypress type of a tree. So I'm not a tree expert. I need my son Ian near because he knows more about this stuff than I do. I just paint them. All right. And then we're going to put kind of these trees over here. There's a telephone pole back there. I don't like telephone poles generally in landscapes too often, but the center of that tree kind of comes up that way, and we have a bunch of branches that go off this way. And I love this stuff back in here. This is just, that's going to where I'm going to have some color type fun back in this area with a little tree. So we get these, part of this little exercise today is painting edges of trees that have lost their leaves in the fall. So say I am doing an autumn painting, I just don't have all that wonderful New England color. Actually, we have some of that up here in Santa Rosa, but it really hasn't come out yet because we still have, our weather is really pretty warm, which most people aren't complaining about. That's about all we're going to need. Now, obviously, the bottom, I love the design of these shadows coming across. So we just kind of map it in there. I don't want the bottom shadow ending up in the corner. I either want it ending up here or here. I think I'm going to go for here because there is a feeling of perspective in here. These lines converge. All right. That's basically some wonderful little pieces of light happening there, back in here, back in here. So I'm going to really play those up. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start, I'm going to rosemary 12 flat, and that's kind of what I'm going to start this with. I wonder why I'm not using my gesso brush. I really can't answer that. I don't know. I just felt like I want to use this brush instead. So the sky has a very warm, almost yellow cast. So I'm going to take white, a little bit of Naples yellow. I'll give you my palette in a second, and some turp. The reason I want turp in is I want that hopefully this will set up enough so if I want to come over it a little darker later, I'll be able to. Not darker, but a little bolder, I would say. Be as free and kind of unconcerned, if that's a word. I don't think it is. With the exactness, you're just approximating. There's that word again. God, I use it all the time. You're approximating kind of where the lights happen. Keep an eye on the time. Got it. That is almost the same height as that. So I'm gonna a little bit more. One of the reasons that I'm not, when I'm thinner and I'm using more terp, I will tend to use the gesso brush. I'm being a little thicker, a little drier, and so I need a brush with a little bit more, a little bit more snap, so it's not as soft. And this way I can rub the paint down, which is what I'm doing. Rubbing, stumbling, whatever you want to call it, which are basically the same thing. Scumbling is a really cool arty term for rubbing, which is kind of rubbing that paint on. Almost like, and you don't want it too wet. That's why I'm not using that right. So I kind of have the sky basically blocked in kind of where I think it's going to be. Okay. I've used the word many, many times. It's a placeholder. Everything in the beginning is a placeholder. In other words, you think you're right, but you're not sure. I'm never sure. I'm sure at the end, and then I'm more sure of anything as to what's wrong with it than what's right with it, which is basically, I think, how you learn. One of the things I would recommend to anybody that's kind of just getting going is don't expect perfection. Most anybody out there that's been painting for years and years and years will tell you they're still waiting for it, as am I. So I'm going really crazy here. Took a cat orange hue and a little bit of burnt sienna, and I'm going to amplify this color. I see it leaning that way, but this is going way overboard, and it's going to be an underpaint. You see it? It's really too strong. I'm laying it in there knowing that it's not going to remain there. That is really more of an underpaint. So it's kind of a nice, rich, and I'm rubbing it in. If you don't know, and if I'm having trouble rubbing it, I may just take my rag and just rub it. So I don't want it thick.
What's the mixture?
The mixture is burnt sienna and a cad orange, kind of deep. It's cad orange hue. As most of you guys know that I use hues and not pure. So you can see I'm still rubbing.
You're trying to just get like an under.
Yeah, this is all going to be, for lack of a better word, underpainting. So I don't want it real thick. And if I don't like it, just will smear it. Right. And then I'm going to deepen it a little bit using more burnt sienna. See that? And we'll just kind of let it come over here a little bit more. You know what the hell with it? Let's do this. I know you guys are wondering what I'm doing. You know, I'm wondering what I'm doing too. So don't feel. I'm just doing stuff.
Okay.
Lose control, bring control back. Keep that in mind. Lose control, bring control back. Makes your painting a lot more exciting. Got a lot of sunlight coming in today from outside. So I'm actually doing kind of a burnt sienna underpainting, truthfully. And if you want to know the honest God truth, I hadn't planned on it. But as I'm painting, I'm just going, let's do this. And sometimes you kind of want it, you just have to try things and cross your fingers that they work. And if they don't, fix it. If it isn't working, change it. So I added a little bit of umber to this. Today I don't have asphalt on my palette, I have umber, burnt umber. And again, you may ask why. And again, I'll probably tell you just basically what I felt like.
It's the closest tube.
What?
I said it was the closest tube to grab.
Yeah, it was. You guys got that?
You didn't have to hunt for it. What's your?
No, I have a lot of burnt umber. I got about 3 or 4 tubes. And so I thought, what the heck? I'm using up the asphalt like crazy, and umber works down there as well. So why not use the umber?
Do you want to run through your color palette?
Yeah, I'll run through my color palette. What do you say? So we got Radiant White. It's a Gamblin Radiant White. I've got some Solvent Free Gel, which I have not used yet. I'll probably use. I've got some Naples Yellow Light, which I love. It's one of my go-to colors when I don't know what the heck to do. I have Yellow Ochre, another, no matter what palette I lay out, I almost always have Yellow Ochre on it. I've got a Yellow Hansa, which is, it's not a cad yellow, although cad yellow might really work in this one, but it is a decent yellow. I'm going to take and I'm going to add more alizarin to that, and I'm going to add more blue, just because I want it a little darker, a little duller as we come forward. But we're going to underpaint some of this stuff in here.
So after the Hansa, then what do you have?
After the Hansa, I have a Cat Orange Hue, big tube that I got on sale. I love sales. Alizarin Crimson, Ultramarine Blue, Sap Green, a little bit of Radiant Blue, just because I have it. Burnt Umber and Burnt Sienna. You know, for a long time I wasn't using Burnt Sienna, and more lately I'm beginning to add it to my palette. And we as artists fall into what we call these comfort zones. A lot of people are using a lot of green. I'll underpaint in red or colors in the red range, burnt orange, things like that, just because when I lay my, any color next to that is going to have a little bit of a green cast. So for right now, we've got the pattern, overall pattern that I see. This is, by the way, this is on a gray kind of a, you can see based on a flesh tone or based on white, the color of the canvas. So, and I always have that in mind.
Mina wants to know, is there any medium that keeps the oil paint moist or wet longer?
Yeah, if you really want to keep it really low, a touch of clove oil it'll keep it wet for a month. If you got to be real careful. Sometimes I've known guys use clove oil. It's taken 6 months for a painting to dry. I like it to dry fast, so I prefer faster drying mediums. But safflower oil will help it extend the drying time. Okay, I'm going to start in on some of the darker tones now within the barn. And so I took some umber, mixed it into the color that I had there, and we're going to put that part of the barn in.
You mentioned something about hue that's just for the orange, right?
Say that again? Oh yeah, Cat Orange Hue. It's basically, it's a beautiful color. It's cat here. I'm going to put a little on a palette and I can bring it up in front of the camera so you can see it. So it's a kind of a light red orange color, or a dark red orange color, I should say. Light is deceiving. It's probably a darker red orange color. So I'm hitting underneath the roof line. So first part of the drawing, I'm actually starting to get in. Okay, so that tells me a little bit about the roof line. Probably have it over a little too far. I think I have this a little too long. If I get it wrong, no one's going to know except you guys, because they're not going to see the reference that I painted from, or they're not going to see the barn. I'm going to just come in with that sky color, two colors, yellow ochre, or excuse me, Naples Yellow Light and white. It's not a hard mixture to find. Okay, I don't like that edge. So edge of that barn is, I want it to be a little bit sharper. There we go. Okay. Now let's start in with some of the colors, this kind of bluish roof line. So ultramarine blue. No, I didn't. I just grabbed sap green. There, ultramarine blue. Mix it in with a little bit of alizarin, a little bit of white. It's a gray blue, so I'm mixing it in kind of the brown color that I already have down here. It's a little darker. Let me test it. One a little darker. Now, if by adding just blue to it, I get some intensity. But if I actually kill that blue with a little umber, I get the grayer blue. That's pretty good. Not bad. Sharp. I'm going to find the back of that roof line. Parallel. That line, it's got to be parallel. So if it starts here, and I'm keeping my eye on that. So I keep the parallel. That keeps the perspective correct. Now, I thought about something as I was just laying this in. So a saying that the wonderful landscape and still life artist Richard Schmidt, I heard him say once, and boy, I think he nailed it. And that is that every artist needs more than one way of coming at things. So as you guys are seeing today, this is different than a lot of the other starts that I've made. And that's kind of what I'm referring to. You kind of, you find it's a way of exciting yourself. It's a way of keeping yourself interested as opposed to just doing the same old that you get good at. And I think to a degree, you have to do that when you're first starting, just so you kind of gain that comfort zone. But eventually you want to get down. Now I do see something really neat. I just caught this. Sorry, I interrupt myself all the time. It keeps you excited. It keeps you more interested in wanting to try things, even though you're still basically painting a traditional painting. We're doing it with a little bit of a different approach, and in using that different approach, you may get different results. That all of a sudden you go, "Hey, I got to do that again." That's what we want. We want to discover. So this is a blue gray. So I added blue, white, and a little bit of that orange. So it's very gray, and I don't even know if it's right. I'm looking at value, and I want to relate the value of the roof to the value of the body of the barn. Okay, not bad. Well, could be a little darker. So a little more blue, a little bit more of the orange. And let's try it one more time. Little touch darker, good. So we're going to kind of soften it into here where it goes into shadow. Go down there. I'm not pressing really hard, everybody. I'm kind of laying it on kind of gingerly. So it's by doing that, by using that light touch and holding the brush this way, as opposed to you hold your brush this way and you're going to get a very firm, crisp edge. By holding your brush this way and kind of just almost just slightly kind of buttering that stroke on, you can get a much softer edge without tremendous amount of time that you have to put in of blending, which is one of the things most people want to do. They want to blend. And so blending just causes overwork until you're ready for it. So we're good. I don't want to wait too long. We got kind of the edges. Got to keep moving.
What size brush is that again?
It's number 12. Number 12, rosemary flat. I kind of like some of that accidental red color coming through. And I actually just mixed the color that I was playing with back in with some of the rusty tones. And we're going to kind of take it so it's a little rustier as it goes back in here. Just a little bit. So we get some color variation. You can really make something look pretty darn dull by keeping it one simple flat color. Almost nothing is just one simple color. And I mean that whether we're talking about hair, whether we're talking about fruit, almost everything has some gradations and variations in it. And by modulating some of those colors, by bringing your cools into your warms into your cools, and subtle value shifts, you can really give some character. I can even see the bottom of this part of the barn has a lot of warmth in it.
So I think you're kind of answering Laurel's question here when she asked, do you decide about color of something do you look directly at the object or do you look at the edge of it to decide color?
Boy, that's a good question.
I mean, you're kind of pushing it right there.
I look at the base, what I call the base color, I guess would be the best way of putting it. The base meaning there'll be colors within colors. And best example of that might be hair. All right. So, but there's going to be a base color. A flesh tone's the same way. We could say the same thing about flesh tones. Flesh tones are basically, if you paint one flesh tone, you do what I refer to as a mannequin, meaning where it's just basically a flesh tone, and then, you know, that's it, one flat flesh tone. If you really look at something like flesh tones, this goes for, I'm using flesh tones as an example, but it goes for everything. Whatever you look at, if you look at it first as a base tone, and then look at it even more carefully, it's a matter of the way you observe. Look at it initially, basically for the overall value, the overall color, and then look for the subtle modulations, the subtle changes that occur within that.
Would you say you're exaggerating some of those
To a degree,
at this point?
not really. I'm really not exaggerating a lot. Maybe just a little. I'm leaning, I'm pushing color. If I see it go a little warm, I'm pushing it a little bit more warm. If I see it a little bit more blue, like I just saw some weird ochres back in here. So I mixed ochre back into that base color. It's got a lot of blue that I was using right about in here. So get a gradation going. Same here, same there. So, you know, I've gone back 3 or 4 times. Now that barn is starting to have what I call character. I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to start in here, work my way across, eventually down.
Is that, by the way, an ivory flat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it is. That's basically what I use. And I've had a couple of them kind of split a little bit, but generally they work really well. So here's my nice dark. Let's a little bit. We want that little edge, and it comes probably more like there. And a little bit of a push, so I don't use the same stroke all the time. Now I'm pulling different strokes because leaves or fronds or whatever you want to refer to these as on any sort of tree or foliage, they have different characteristics. And if you paint one way, say you paint like this, everything is the same. Everything is the same. So that's why I switch my grip a lot. And that way I can rub, I can pull, I can push, I can drag, I use all those things because none of those tree branches are the same. So you want the differences. Now your paint has got to be the right consistency, which is the most difficult part to get. I've always felt that as a student, feel it to this day. How thick, how thin, some of that has to do with what you're painting into. If I'm painting into wet paint, I have to be more careful. So we've got a little bit, I kind of found the curve. Now there's a telephone pole back there and I'm leaving that out. So that curve feels about right. I probably have it over too far now that I'm just looking at it. So I'm going to do this. Well, anyways, here, but we have a visitor today. Way in the background, our grandson Jude is visiting us. And I had a long talk with him and tried to talk him into posing. And since he's only barely 3 months old, he wasn't willing. And I didn't feel like painting a moving object. So it's hard enough to paint this kind of stuff. See, if you do a little push every now and then, as your bristles, they kind of separate and they give kind of some of those runaway characteristic. And then that means you can actually go back with negatives, meaning the sky, and refine some of that if you want. But some of it is just naturally put in by the way you use your brush. Oh, I like that drag. I'm trying to keep my paint kind of thin so at the end, if I really want to power some paint in there, I can really power it in. But right at this stage, I really want it to be kind of, I don't want it to be thick.
What do you mean by powering it in?
Um,
That's my question.
Powering it in would be doing something like, yeah, that's just a firm, bold stroke. Probably just screwed that up. Light touch right there. I know some people have commented on that about the touch, and boy, that is just something you acquire through practice, coming up with that right touch. Just sometimes if my paint's wet enough, I can just set the brush down and make a mark that works
So lightly.
very lightly. I'm just touching it. I had something handy. Let me grab a back of a photo here so I can show you what I'm talking about. So if you look at that, I'm just like that. You almost don't see the brush touch it. Okay, so but your paint has to be wet enough. And if you're painting into wet paint, you can only do a couple strokes like that, because what happens is you pick up that paint from below and you redeposit it. Pretty soon it gets murky and gross. I added some medium, and now it's going down too bold. Probably have too much paint on the brush. So you have to react to the way the paint's going down. If it's going down really, if you're having a hard time getting down, it means you probably have to press more or add a little more medium. And if it's going down too easy, it means you probably have to dry your brush out a little bit. So that's why I'm talking a little bit about edges. You know where you really learn this kind of stuff? What I'm doing now is watercolor. Because in watercolor, you don't have the, if you're a purist, you don't have the option of going back and painting the negative. So you have to be really careful and delicate with the way that paint goes down. And once it's down, it's down. And a mistake is a mistake, and you have to kind of learn how to live with it. Now in oils, you don't have to learn how to live with it, because you can go back and opaque and change. So watercolor is a great training medium, by the way. Just wonderful. I love all mediums. I love pastel, acrylic, watercolor, gouache. They're all fun. They all have their own unique properties, and some of them overlap. I mean, acrylic and oils overlap a lot. Watercolor and gouache can overlap. Pastel is it's kind of like oil to a degree, and at the same time, because it's dry medium, the one thing about something like pastel is you cannot mix on a palette. Your palette is the page that you're working on. So you literally have got to, if you want a specific color that you don't have, maybe you have 100 colors in your pastel range, but you don't have it, then you have to layer 2 or 3 different colors to get to that color. One teaches the other. I've felt ever since I was a student not to be handcuffed to any one medium. I mean, there are certain reasons. As a young illustrator, I used almost exclusively acrylics, and the reason for that was changes. As an illustrator, it was not unusual to do a piece, not often get somebody that needed more put in or less, or maybe you did something not the way they wanted, and you had to make an adjustment. In that regard, acrylics worked the best because it was the easiest to change. Oils, you got a whole drying problem. Watercolor is transparent. So it really solved the problem for me as a young illustrator. Now, let's get over in here. I want to get enough of this laid in. We're just about 30 minutes in. I'm a little behind where I'd like to be. A little lighter on that roof back there. I'm going to give it more atmosphere. So the color I was using was a lot of umber. And I just mixed a little bit of ochre and a little bit of alizarin into it. And we're going to paint this roof line back here. Leave it about there. Go back to my tree color, which is pretty much umber and a little bit of ultramarine. Notice I'm not using green. I don't see green. I know it's a tree, and I know they are greens. I see them as dark shapes. And so I'm painting what I see, the way I feel it. Also, I want this whole thing to harmonize color-wise. So I do want to keep it a little bit more on the warm side. Even those greens are there's some beautiful oranges within those greens. So I'm going to try and go far enough on a lot of this stuff that we can get into some of those wonderful super color variations on those greens. Now, the paint was feeling a little bit dry, and I'm painting into very wet paint. So I added a touch of safflower oil so I don't have to press as hard. It'll go down really nicely. This is also a place that you can use a different kind of a brush. I'm using all one brush, but let me give you a quick example. I'm just going to take, let's see what we got here. Well, I've used these many times, but let's take a mongoose, synthetic mongoose, a rosemary synthetic mongoose. And it's, number one, it's got a much softer, so I don't have to press. Now I added too much medium to it. How come I know? I can feel it because I can see the character of the brush stroke is got a totally different look. This you even press lighter. You do not press as hard. I like that. You notice I'm scraping the ferrule of the brush?
Yeah, why are you doing that?
Because I'm trying to paint with this part of the brush so that I get certain kinds of characteristics. That's why, oh, I don't like that at all. My paint was too wet, but I'll deal with that as a negative. Now, if it's a watercolor, I've got a problem. I'm gonna have to figure out what to do with that if it's a watercolor. But because it's oil, I know I can come back on it. And there's some foliage up in front of this. Right in here, I can kind of mess up a little bit. I'm going to go back to this brush just because I like the way the marks it's making a little bit better. If it feels too warm, that last stroke I put down felt quite warm, so I actually added some sap to it just because it felt warmer than I wanted. And I want the kind of busy characteristics that I feel back in there. The last thing I'm going to do before I go too far is just kind of barely let this brush come down. Now,
What size was that brush? Sorry.
that's still a number 12 flat. It's the brush I've been using all along.
Oh.
I'm going to go back to burnt sienna now. And I've kind of milked that down with a little bit of white, and I'm throwing some blue into it to kind of mellow the redness of that color. But I do want a degree of redness. Nope. God, I thought that on my palette that looks so much more red. There's the side, goes back into here, come back over it. Now we're gonna get the feeling of those trees. Well, see how it mixed right into the color? It's not what I wanted. Also, I want to bring some of the branches over it. So I added more medium, same color that I was using here with more medium. Now,
I'll ask you, Rosie was asking, she wants to buy a set of rosemaries. What recommendations to get for someone who paints still life?
we'll get an 8 flat. Depends on how big. You know, I'm basing a lot of my answer on what I do. So if you're painting smaller, a 10 would be about as large as you want to go. I'd get a flat, I'd get a filbert, both, one of each. And then I'd get a few of the smaller Let me see if I have it here. I know I have them. I just have to find them. I have stuff everywhere. All right, this is kind of small, but it's not real small. This is I lost the number. It's again, one of the synthetic. Let me see. Okay. The big one that I was using is a number 9. So this one must be like a 6 or a 5. And then go down and get a couple smaller ones like the real, these are the synthetic mongoose. And I know Rosie paints a lot tighter, and those will allow you to paint tighter and really be really happy with the kind of quality you're getting out of it. So what I'm trying to do now is just paint all this stuff kind of loose in here. And I'm going to paint kind of some of that brush back in there, but I'm going to use, looking for, yeah, let's stay with, okay, I'm kind of, what I did is I meshed up the tip. See how it's all frayed? I pushed down on my palette, frayed the brush. By doing that, I can get different types of characteristics of those branches. I don't want to paint them individually. I want to paint the group of them together. Again, this is where if you've done watercolor, man, this kind of stuff is just perfect for your watercolor enthusiasts. Now, I know I want to paint that roof cleaner at the ends, and there's some of that runaway stuff comes out from behind. You almost paint it like you're painting smoke. When trees, you paint those so they're wispy, they're kind of lost back in there. Now there's another tree, the tree that comes right down in the corner, it's going to come right about there. And I know it's going to come up over the roof, and I want to get the background in before I do it over the roof. A little bit lighter, I threw a little ochre, a little cat orange into the color I was already using, and light touch on that brush. See, I don't like it because all the strokes are going the same direction. So what I might do in that case is sometimes pick a bigger brush. Like here's a big old long bristled filbert or eggbird, if you will. I might have more success with that. If I start painting on something and I'm not getting the marks that I want, I'm going to try and find another way of dealing with it. I like that much better. That gives me more of the quality where I don't get the deliberate kind of marks. Now those might work as a nice underpainting for some of the stuff that I'm doing on top. It's too thick. I'm going to have to come over with, I can tell right now, with some of the sky color. But you give it that kind of smoky look. Now, if it's too strong, I've got the sky color mixed up right here, and I have a smaller eggbird, and I mixed a little white. I mixed a little of that into it, and we can kind of come back and just over it a little bit, and we can paint some negatives. I don't want to get into it yet. The more time I have, the more refined I'd be about this. But where it tends to feel a little too dense up in here, I'm just going to brush over it a little bit. I don't want it that dense. That feels better. Starting to feel more smoky, like when I look at the tree there, it begins to have more of that characteristic. So I'm going to hold on that for a little bit. Some of these things I know that I can get so wrapped up in that all of a sudden time's shy. And and if you're working on your own, I think that's absolutely fine on a studio piece. If you're working plein air, you can't do it. Because by the time you spend 40 minutes to an hour, the light has shifted too much. So now what I've done here is I've added some more orange and ochre, but not enough. I want a little more separation there. And I want that to kind of blend neatly. And I'm just going to take the rag again into that background. So, because I want this to be quite warm over in here, but I am going to use other colors on it. So for example, I took more ochre and yellow, and we'll kind of come, because it's not as clean flat of a color. Do a lot of scumbling. Painting a little bit different than I have in some of the others. So hopefully you guys are noticing that. I'm doing that on purpose because I kind of have an intent in mind of what I'm trying to do. My overall, if I'm going to describe what my intent is, it's to be lighter and warmer, and go darker and denser as we go over here. Because that's the direction the light is coming from. The light is coming from the right. That is easy to see because of the cast shadow. You can see the top of the tree shadow right here. So edge quality, crisp, kind of ethereal right in here. So we deal with those two things. We want to get enough of the ground plane and some of the darker foliage that is in front of that house. See it there, there. Okay, that's kind of fun. Let's leave it alone and start to move down. Okay, now you're wondering, I'm going to get that tree in. I'm giving it time to hopefully set up a little bit. I'm going to get the windows in, a little bit of maybe some of that structure. We'll clean up some edges. Eventually, I will take something like a larger liner. I have a small liner here at my disposal. I do have larger ones, but I would go back carefully with the liner and etch out some of the stuff that I don't like. And if a little of that warm comes through, great. So you're using the combination of positive and negative painting in an area like that. You know, that would be the negative, and that would be the positive. All right, I'm going to go back into that. Hopefully, I will give myself enough time to be able to get that far into it. We're going to start to move down a little bit. So I'm going to take a little bit of umber and a little bit of blue, and I'm going to go right over that red. And I'm going to look. I can see it go bluer, but I want this to be kind of. I'm mapping it in right now.
Donna wants to know, did you lay in the reddish color as an underlay for the lawn shadows?
Yeah. Yes, I did. And I will enhance that color, providing I have the time. The more time I have, the more I can enhance it and do subtle variations in it, get a little bit more blue violets going on, things of that nature. Now, the next shadow down has quite a bit more blue into it. So I just took the same color I was just working with, added more blue. Now I'm adding white. And I added too much white, but I don't care. Add a little bit of blue, maybe a little bit of, and I can see it change. Just see it go darker. And I'm mixing, as I'm mixing ultramarine, I'm mixing a little bit of alizarin. Oh, that's much better. It falls into that color range. Actually, even if I stand back like 2 feet, I can see the difference. It does make a big difference. Now, the next shadow that I was getting at, I can use that same color because the color is working. And if that color's off, I'll adjust it later. Don't put it in there and sit there and fuss and evaluate. Oh, it's wrong. Oh my God, I got to fix it. I'll tell you what, if you do that, you're never going to move on your painting. Never. You're never going to get anywhere. Be wrong. Be wrong, then fix it. You know, do an educated guess. Now, the quick studies class that I started, one of my concepts in developing that particular class was a simple saying that I kind of came up with. Most artists are better than they think they are. Now, if you think you're really good, you're probably wrong. But most artists are better than they think they are. In other words, the ones that are really hard on themselves. And what happens is you sit down and you work and you work and you work, and it just doesn't. And it's because you want perfection from the beginning. Okay. First of all, if we could scrap the word perfection, that would be cool. Secondly, that comes at the end. Or as another saying that I came up with 100 years ago, it seems like, is the finish should look better than the beginning. I mean, think about it. It's so logical. we're getting a little hints and flavors of that reddish color coming through. Okay. I kind of like that. I kind of like the little accidental accents of these reds. So I added some more alizarin to my blue.
Do you have medium or are you using?
I'm using primarily terp right now. I've used a little bit of medium, but not a lot. But I primarily have used terp. I'd rather be a little overdone with these darks and then have to go back and fix it than I would. I want to get a little bit of a scuffing in here. I don't like the back of that, but we'll fix that. Again, if there's things I don't like about it, hopefully I'll have time to fix it. At least while you guys are watching. Clean the brush a little bit, get a little bit of the residue out. Not much, but I want to get some of the greens in so I can get kind of a lay in. Then I'll go back and start worrying about what we would call refinements. Okay.
When you say you're cleaning the brush, you're just wiping up.
When I cleaned the brush, what I did is I dipped it in terp and squished it around a little bit and then wrung it out with my rag. So now this has got a lot of ochre, and I'm going to bring a little bit more orange into it, probably more than I need right here. We're just going to kind of drag that brush right there. Now that paint, you see how dry that stroke was? So what that told me, you know, you're signaling to yourself all the time. What that told me is I needed more medium. So I added more medium to that same color. Look at the difference. And it's a light touch. I'm still not pressing hard. And I'm trying to get these orange. I see these incredible ochres and oranges underneath the greens. Now I can sneak them back in on the greens, or I can starts ochre. It gets very green as it goes across. So we're going to start that way. So the color harmony. Now we're going to start to separate the harmony a little bit. Naples yellow light, a little bit of the real yellow, a little bit of sap. Holy smoke, too much. Had to throw more ochre into it. That green was just way too pronounced. Let's see what this is. Okay, it's not bad. It could be a little darker, so I'm going to add either ultramarine or more sap into it and more ochre. And I've added, I got some safflower oil into this. Boy, that color is pretty good. Shocks me when I hit it. I don't expect it. I expect having to make a few stabs at it. And when you're doing foliage, the more layers you can put on, the better off you guys will all be. Now, I just noticed as this moves up into that area, it gets a lot greener. So I mixed some more sap, some more yellow, and that's probably too much, but I'm going to do it anyway. A little bit more sap and a little more ochre. Ochre.
You're just looking at pattern of light and shadow.
I'm just looking at the filtering light. Light is filtering through foliage in the background. It tends to feel a little bit more green, and as it gets out and gets more of what we would call full sun, it gets more of the warmth into it. We also have this little sliver of light kind of coming right about there. So leave it for right now. Boy, look how bright this gets right in here. And I don't want to start there. I want to end up there. That's a good line, you guys. Write that down. I don't want to start there. I want to end up there. It goes back to that whole thing about finish looking better than the beginning. Obviously, as I refine. So I'm mixing a lot of oranges because I see them. Now, someone looking at it might immediately just see the greens, but man, there's so much more in there. It's not just green. Too much glare?
A little bit.
Okay. That's going to change the whole thing, and I'm going to hate it.
Did it make it too dark?
Naples yellow, no. Naples yellow light, a little yellow. And let's see what this does. It's a brighter color. Okay. Still, I can still go brighter. Right here. So it comes right there. There's one. It's mixing right into that color underneath, which is just fine with me. Probably have to use a knife up in here at the end to really get the strength that I want. You notice the strokes are going both ways. Sometimes they're going up and down. I threw some more orange. And there's a little accidental thing, and I kind of like it. There's a little bit of warm sneaking back in here. I don't see it there. I'm just adding it out of feeling. So we have it's a kind of a dark version of what I see in front of me. Before I go too much further, I want to get this foreground tree in. So we're going to go back to umber and ultramarine, which I can create a warm black by either adding alizarin or burnt sienna to it. And what we're going to do is we're going to go right here. Okay, so we started it right there. So we're getting one light touch. Wet paint. Why wet paint? Because I'm painting into wet paint already. So, and it's going to overlap, kind of. There's a density that occurs too. Density meaning I can't see through it. I got to stand back for a second. I want to get some more color I can see right now. Get a lot more interesting color going on. A lot wetter paint. It still wasn't wet enough. So I added terp. Oh, was that ugly? Oh, there's a beautiful golden light. I just caught it. I didn't see it earlier. It goes back to kind of, as you're going closer to your finish, you're paying more attention to nuances and not so much just the big bold shapes, but some of the subtleties. And so that has a lot to do with the character that you end up with as a finished piece, is the building of all the subtleties. Because you can't get them all in there at once. It takes layering. And in a studio painting where you're painting long enough, you actually have the opportunity of letting your paint dry, painting back over it. There's a lot of real pluses. So we're coming up close to this density. It still isn't there. I'm going to get as much as I can in before I move on to other areas. And a little bit. I threw actually more terp because I wanted to, and I may have to do some of this with a liner. I'd rather not, because when I use a liner, I really do feel like I'm doing more drawing marks and not painting marks. So I prefer to try and create it with a larger brush, and then if I do need cleanup and refinement, go ahead and use that liner, which I will do.
Laurel wants to know if you could talk about how your eye is moving through the painting.
Well, it does. My eye moves to the painting from the beginning. From the beginning, I'm looking at. I'm going from one side to another side rather than putting something in and feeling like it's wrong. I'm just putting it in and leaving it. If it's wrong, my feeling is I'll pull it off later. You know, some of that is confidence, some of it's cockiness, some of it's blind faith. It's probably more blind faith than anything. Liner
But you're trying to set up things before you.
Absolutely.
Going through trying to set up most areas and then go back.
The more it's all, another way of saying that, what you said is a great way of putting it, is you're always, keep in mind, you're always setting up for the next stage, the next layer. Eventually, when you don't see any more stages you can go through, you're done. People want to know how you know when you're done. Basically, when you don't see anything else you can do to it to improve it. As long as you see, then you're not done. Or if you're painting from life, you're done when the sun goes down, unless you're going to go back a second day when it changes. Or if you're painting a model from life, you're done when the model gets up and walks away. So in a studio painting, completely different, because you have that great opportunity. All right, I'm going to soften edges right now. I'm like tickling that color. So it softens, so it gradiates down. I want the crisp edge on top. And I don't have it yet. Hopefully I will at the end. We'll start with this. Okay, so I've got the nice crisp edge on top, but I also have a crisp edge on the bottom, which I don't want, because that's kind of a shadow that's fading away. So what I'm going to do is clean that brush a little bit so there's not a lot of paint on it. And I'm just going to kind of brush over it, soften it, or you can brush down on it. Go either way. And I can always make that edge more crisp with the sky later. Now, I want to go back to that roof. And I'm going to use the liner for this. I think it's about here. Let's take a quick peek. That looks about right. I just want to clean it up a little bit. Goes up here, up. Now I'm going to have to use the sky. I can tell right now. And it's through here. So we see little blips of the roof that are kind of coming through the holes in that tree. And the only way it's going to work is the sky. So I know I'm going to need to take that sky color. And at this point, follow this line down there. Boy, look at it right in here. Big sky area. Now, all of a sudden, that side of the roof starts to make sense now. It didn't before. In here, we're going to follow it on down. I'm painting negatives. If I mess up, I will paint positives. So now we start to see the sky through some of those tree holes. And when, of course, you mess up. Whenever I put my little finger down, you end up messing up. And I see, again, I'm going to take the same color. And I forget who came up with the word, but I like this kind of word. We're particularizing some of the branches. What that means is we're finding, we can't do them all, not in this amount of time, but every now and then when I see a branch, and if I can clarify it, I will do that. These are negatives. I will paint positives. Painting negatives in this tree. I'm going to take I don't like that. Use that damn little brush too long and it really, it starts to show. It starts to feel like you've done little drawing marks. So we're going to come in with the sky. Got to keep the paint really wet here. Going to take a lot of care over in here too. I haven't even gotten into that tree. Kind of let your brush dance. Just kind of go in and find the lights and overdo it. Go back and fix it. Now down here on this, let's get that roof line. Okay. Look how crisp that's how crisp that is. So there's a couple of trees that interrupt it, and it probably is more about here than it was where I had it. And we can always go back and have the trees interrupt. Now I see a little bit of light coming through here and there. If I do them in fast, I'll be wrong. And then what I do is I use the positives of the tree trunks themselves and paint those in over. Let's see if I can show you what I mean. Boy, when I've done this stuff where I've just taken a lot of time at the end and just gone in and really nurtured a lot of this kind of stuff. But when you're painting quick, it's more about indicating. And I think I've mentioned many times, most of these demos that I do are basically like large, giant plein air studies that I would be doing if I were on location. They're not ultra refined. So we got the feeling, we're gonna leave it alone. I want to go back in here now. I got to keep moving. Somebody mentioned about keeping your eye going through the picture. You've got to keep doing that if you give yourself a time frame. If you're painting outside of location, the sun's out, whether you want it to or not, you have to work with the time frame. You don't have that luxury of just being able to work forever. Now, what you can do is you can go back. You can work on a 3-hour stint and go back the next day and work on another 3. So that is always possible. But if you're doing it alla prima in one setting all at once, then you've got to keep moving. You cannot dwell. If you do, time's done and you got half a painting done. Okay, let's get that tree in there. I'm going to go with a smaller filbert. Going to stay with the real warm, lighter colors. And we're going to bring that tree from right here. I'm going to bring it more about here, up over, and let it drift off. And we paint, again, you paint all that, those loose branches, almost like you're painting smoke. Because they have that kind of quality. You can't, I mean, that's a whole conglomeration of little branches that make up those little areas like that. And we'll kind of, and then you're going to get some of the firmness, and I can do that either with a liner or I can do it with this brush. So I'm using this brush for one thing. Let's use a liner and we'll kind of go in and real quickly make some of these little marks, these more obvious kind of tree trunks. The faster I paint, the more I just make up. The slower I paint, the more I can worry about the exactness. And sometimes it messes me up when I worry too much about the exactness and I lose spontaneity and I lose. So there's pros and cons to doing it all different ways. And everyone's going to find an avenue or an approach that works for them. What works for me may not work for you, and vice versa. And I also think the more you paint and the more you try different things, the more you'll learn. And by different things, I mean subjects too. I mean, don't always feel like you have to paint the same subject over and over. Paint a boat, you know, paint an athlete, smoke. Wispy. A couple of little pieces coming in on the side. Tree trunk right there. I've got to use negatives now to make that work. I see, I'm going to take a little yellow and I see a little brighter patch of weeds, like right in there. And I can see a little bit of color change down. Looks like this is a ridge of a color change in here. It's darker. I love going back into these areas and working with warms and cools and cools and warms, and it just gets, you can make it so rich rather than just stay with that one, you know. And that's, again, I'm telling you what I like. I'm not telling you that everyone has to do this. There are painters that would be more abbreviated and treat it more like just the whole thing would be a beautiful lay-in. And that works too. Again, it's what your personal intent is. I can't stress that enough. Knowing what you want to achieve. If you don't know what you want to achieve, one of the best things I could tell people is use another artist and say, I like the way so-and-so did this. This is the effect I'm after. And then paint your own paper. Don't look at keep in mind the look, but don't copy it. Let the influence happen. But go ahead.
Oh, Barbara wants to know if you find sometimes when you start putting in little details like windows that it actually looks less real.
Yeah. If you get to that point, wipe it out. Seriously, if you get to that point, wipe it out. Do it again. I always say if it looks wrong, go back a stage where it may have looked right. Or another way of thinking about it is painting isn't only a forward process. Meaning sometimes you have to backtrack. See, this kind of stuff is the fun stuff, but for demonstration purposes, if I spent too long doing this, I would have a nice looking tree and the rest of the painting would look like hell. And I'm trying to avoid that. So I'm trying to get everything up to a comparable level. Now, the thing that's kind of nice that's happening in here is we're getting little pieces of that warm underpainting coming through here and there. I'm going to wipe my finger, put my little fingernail down, and kind of clean so I see the bottom of the roof. Where are we at? Okay, I got almost 30 minutes, not quite. And that's what I look for. I'm looking for time. You kind of get an idea of how long something might take you. I do this all the time. In fact, I have students a lot of times time themselves when they do any painting, particularly finish work. Trying to keep an idea is how long is this particular painting taking you? It's helpful knowledge. Not that I think you should ever paint strictly for a time frame unless you're practicing. Like I'm doing. This is practice. Okay. So when you're going to do that, there's nothing wrong whatsoever with working for a time frame. Otherwise, work for quality. It's not how fast you work, it's how good your painting is. I'm just seeing the busyness that I'm looking at, and that's what I'm trying to capture. And some of the accuracy, and then the freedom is going to happen elsewhere. So that tree is kind of beginning to work. I'm not crazy about it. I can see more. I'm going to dry that brush off a little bit. I can see more abstracty little areas, and then I can pull those out if I want with negatives that I can go in with. For example, up in here, go in with just a little bit. I don't want to paint exactly. I want to paint the feeling of what I see and not the exactness of what I see. I know I keep repeating myself when it comes to that kind of stuff, and I don't think I can probably say it enough. I really think it's something that everyone needs to kind of consider as they paint, is not painting the precision, but painting the look and the feeling. Only time you want to paint the precision is if you're doing super photorealistic type still life, and then you build up towards the precision. You don't start with the precision. The only thing you might do is start with the drawing that's very precise, and then be relatively free. Don't be confined too much to the way you take it from that point on. Trying to throw some of the stuff kind of out of focus over on that side. Okay. There's a little piece of light coming through. It looks like there's probably brush back behind that tree that is being illuminated right about here. It's kind of fun. If you see little colors, you can kind of move them around a little bit, bring a little bit more life to that. All right, I want to get over in this area and we'll come back into this and we'll finish with, that's the plan. Got it? I'm going to take the tree, after I put all those nice tree holes in, green, brown, kind of mixed, kind of a mucky color. I need to work with both large and small because we need some of the tree trunks. I mentioned that this is where you kind of you block things in and then you go in and really clarify. So there's a tree trunk there. Every time I put a stroke down, I am having to pick up fresh paint almost because I'm mixing it right into that white. And if there's 17 tree trunks back there, don't feel compelled to put all 17 in. If there's, just put in what feels good. Look at your painting as a painting, not as a replication of the subject that's in front of you. That's a hard thing to do. And I'll tell you why. It's one of the reasons it's hard is what you see in front of you, you automatically assume is right. So, and you want to be right. So you're automatically going to want to make it just like what you see. But when you start dealing with trees, when you start dealing with organic nature, rocks, a rock can take any shape, a tree can grow any way. So you want the character of the tree. This is what I keep saying, paint the character, not the exactness.
Sorry.
That was Jude. Okay, now some light on those tree trunks back there. This is where you start to look down and you begin to see, look at these little pieces, and it's really warm light. So I can bring that orange, I'm gonna take that orange, yellow, and white. Whoop, too much, because they have a lot of red. And all of a sudden I see a tree trunk right there. That's too much. Throw some alizarin into it. Redden it up a little bit and darken it at the same time. Another tree trunk right there. Sometimes they almost go down to the ground plane. Another tree trunk. I don't know, right there. And then there's some interesting foliage, light foliage back in here. And another tree trunk right there. Now, one of the things I want to do, I want to get that ground plane in. There's some real beautiful light yellow greens that are, yeah, they are yellow greens. Okay, I was looking to see if they're more warm. I'm putting a little bit of the medium into it. And what we want to do is I want them to come from here, and I'm going to get a little bit more green. So I threw some white into it, and I'm going back, picking up a little bit more of the green to that color. Let's see what this is like. This is pretty daring for me, but okay, I'm just gonna use my arm. I'm trying to be too precise. Heather, once you put those in there, they're trees and branches that overlap. So they come down here and they overlap. Another one coming out here. Another one back here. Big one down here. It's a nice big bold tree. A couple little branches kind of come off. So this little activity I'm adding is what is your payoff. So you may be working like you're like a slave to get this whole thing going. And you have these little beautiful payoff areas. Okay, I'm going to do a couple more, and then we're going to start. I'm going to get it on that barn, and probably a lot of you are wondering when I'm going to mess with that. Trying to get everything set up. Most of that's going to be real indicated. All right, so all that nice precision, cleaning up some of this so it really feels correct. Got some beautiful little branches coming in down this way. God, I really like some of the movements that are going on. Movements of branches, the directions they're taking.
Oops.
A little bit of a heavy-handed stroke there. All right. Let's see if we can, I'm going to go back a little bit to the shadow color up in here. Add a little bit more blue into it. Because this is what I really wanted to get into, is really get the subtleties of all these kind of shadows. There's some really beautiful color in there. My gosh. I could really have a field day just going back and forth, painting it in, standing back to see if I've got it. So I brought a little more of a blue-green into it, pretty much in the center. Color harmony is working okay, guys. So in my opinion, I'm going to take a small, let's see what I got here. How about a flat? I do want a flat. I guess I'll use this one. I was not looking for a dark blue, brown, near black. I want a little bit of warmth into it so it harmonizes with the painting. So throw a little alizarin into it. All right. It's loose. And I'm looking at the shape of that. That's going to give me my window. So I'm going to rest my hand down here and I'm going to paint. I'm going to whiten it. I'm going to paint that window in first. So we're going to look and see about right about there.
Blocking.
Huh?
Might be blocking a little bit. Do you need
Right
a
about here.
small stick?
Down. Leave it alone. Again, watercolor training. Smaller window below it. A little narrower, so I just made it a little bit like the angle. Got it. Another one over here. Same height, right about here. Back on the side, I'm going to cool them off a little bit, and I'm going to try and narrow that tip of that brush. And we're going to go one right. Didn't go down. There. Don't like the shape, but live with it. And one right there. Back in perspective. That feels pretty good. Now, with my liner, I want to put a few of these branches. And then if I have to soften it, if they stand out too much, I will go back and fuzz them up like smoke. Like they're standing out, that's too much. But if it does, you can take any brush you have, any brush, and just go back and fuzz over it a little bit so it doesn't stand out so much. If it stands out too much, knock it back. If it doesn't stand out enough, put it back in. Go both ways. I'll tell you one of the reasons I wanted to get that set up is something I noticed, a little bit of white, and I'm going to take ochre, white, and I already have some orange down there. And I'm going to need some of my medium because it's got to stick. A little bit more ochre. This is a test right up in here. All these catches just a little bit of light. A little more ochre. Just to get a little bit more snap in it. If it stands out too much, push it back. Okay, I want it to pop a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add more white to that color. And maybe a little bit of yellow. And get a little bit, so we're layering once again. So we got one layer on, now we're going to do a lighter layer. And looking to see where else I might see. Oh, I see a little bit of light, warm light, up in here and there on these trees. So we get a little bit of light color variation. I got this back in here. Now, I want to do a little bit more on this, give it a little bit more character. Oh, we're fine. So lighter. I'm going to have to clean the sky up at the end because I'm messing it up quite a bit. Oh, too dark. I want a little bit of the what? It's not sticking. That's my paint. My paint was too dry. You should be able to make each stroke is going to be a little different because as we're picking up paint. Now, if I go too far with it, it's pretty easy to just go back and fuzz it. Nah, darker. Darker. Okay, I see little touches. I look really carefully of almost a rusty below that window. And shadow from underneath the roof. Oh, I like that. That's good. Now, because this is something I'm just beginning to notice, this is where it's really good if I have my, which I don't. So I'll use a brush. I was looking for my mole stick. But what I want to do is, oh, good. Here's a stick. Just appeared.
Pretend one.
Okay, so if I want to point. Whoops. We want to kind of. I know I'm blocking. I mean, I'm trying to do it so I won't block. How's that? Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little awkward for you.
It's very awkward, but it's okay.
Do you like the Gamblin Solvent Free medium?
I'm sorry. Say it again.
Do you like the Gamblin Solvent Free?
I love it. I love it. I like it for finishing. I don't use it until I'm ready to finish. Now, you see how I messed up? It's because I put my little finger down there. It's okay. It's not hard. The best thing to do is when you mess it up, don't keep fixing it because you got to keep going back and messing it up again. So when you think you're about at the right stage, then go back and fix it.
Okay, can you move your stick? Blocking.
Darker. So I've added a color, but I left myself room to go darker. Always try to do that. That's probably close to as dark as I can get too, right in there. But the foliage isn't just a graphic shape now. It has a little bit more meaning to it. And I don't want that bottom where it blends in the shadow. I don't want that to be too abrupt. So and I see, whoa, I just caught that. Beautiful. Right there. A little bit of a tone back here. That's too light. But what it does is it sets in front of the tree and then sets a little bit behind that tree. So it just kind of softens. So this softens back into the background. Okay, let's take that foreground area and really push it now. A lot of white. So when I say a lot of white, that's what I picked up. All right, mix it down, grab some yellow. That's what I picked up. Mix that yellow. All right, now it has a lot of ochre in it. Here's the ochre. More ochre. I gotta add more ochre to my paint. It's here.
I'll find it.
It's right here. That's burnt sienna. That's raw sienna.
Here, just try to.
Anyway, I'm going to push with that. I can actually add a little bit of burnt sienna into it. That'll help the yellow, and that'll give it kind of an ochre cast. There. There's the ochre, and maybe just a touch of green. Okay, now I'm going to add Solvent Free Gel. And I'm going to test it right here. That's brighter than I wanted. You guys can probably look at that and go, well, that's too bright. It is. But that gives me a starting point. That tells me, okay, I'm in the range. I'm just too dark. Let's try that. A little bit too orange. More yellow. More green. Let's try that. I like that better. We're going to work them all together now. All together now.
I'm not sure if Mitchell was asking the question, but he said, so you keep the shadow areas around a 7 or 8 value to leave room for darkening.
Yeah, I would say an 8 or 9. Yeah. Whenever you don't go absolute. Your absolutes are white and black. All right. If you go light, you can't go any lighter. If you go black, you can't go any darker. So you want to give yourself a little bit of room to manipulate in, so that you can go darker, you can go lighter.
Is the safflower oil by Gamblin? Or?
Yes, it is. They have it by many, but I use Gamblin products a lot. So the safflower that I have is by Gamblin. Winsor Newton has it too. So if you're a lover of Winsor Newton products, use the Winsor Newton. Don't want that stroke to just be one direction. But we're getting that it's starting to feel like light now. There's actually a little cat back in there if I really wanted to play. But for me, it doesn't add a lot because it's so minor. And if I were going maybe more real, I might want to do something like that. But in more of an impressionistic piece as this is, no, I don't want to do that. A lot more orange now. Well, I'm just going to take burnt sienna. There we go. I've exaggerated. I want it to be in the same color range and absolutely in the same value range or similar value range. So it still feels like there's a few little weeds that kind of overlap. Boy, I see them. They're really nice kind of touches in there. Back in here, I don't like that. Went too far with it.
Linda wants to know, when you varnish, do you prefer matte or high gloss finish?
Satin. I like it in between.
Finish.
I don't like matte. The only time I've ever used matte is when I was painting for illustration purposes, and I purposely did not want any glare on my painting. Other than that, I generally like a little bit of gloss, but not a super high gloss. That's me. That's not. I know there are people, I got a couple friends that use super high gloss and it looks really cool, but their work tends to be a little more contemporary. So what I'm doing is I'm heightening, just so you guys are wondering, I'm keying up the lights. I had them in there, and my assessment when I stood back is they could stand to be pushed further. That's basically what I'm doing. I'm just taking them to the next level up. I go lighter. So I took some some Naples yellow, put it into that color. And I want this variation. Foliage is not one clean color. Weeds are not one clean color. There are a myriad of tones and values that maybe look like they're maybe a yellow green, but when you really study them closely, you notice that they're made up of many, many other colors. So I did something really weird here. I grabbed some, I don't know if it's going to work. I see little hints of greener. So I grabbed some of my radiant blue and I'm testing. I see this field greener as it goes back in this region. I don't like that right there. I think it's too much, but I like the subtle flavor of it. And so if I can kind of go over it a little bit, let some of it kind of come through, that'll add. And then I see a lot of beautiful, warm tones. So I'm taking a little burnt sienna and ochre. And I mistakenly mixed a little green into it, but
Might be going a little bit over here.
Huh?
Might be going a little over.
yeah, I'm just about where I want to be. I'm going to take the sky, clean up the sky. I'll clean up the trees a little later, add a little bit more care into that because it's a little bit abbreviated, but that's what you get when you do these quickies. And I consider this, quick for an 18 or 24. So I'm going to clean up the sky with a clean brush, white, Naples yellow, mix it in a clean spot on my palette now, so I don't contaminate it with other colors. Add some safflower oil so it isn't too dry. Perfect.
So Mitchell has a good comment here. Generally darks recede in space. How can that be avoided in the lower right corner? The lower right looks great. Is the location
Say that again, the darks?
recede in space?
Not always. If you have an overall light picture, a dark's going to come forward.
So the lower right is the location, the diagonal that keeps it forward?
Yes, to a degree, it is perspective, but as you just mentioned it, I just noticed some great greens. So what I'm going to do, thanks for mentioning that, because now I can touch it up in a very quick fashion. Probably, yeah, just about there. Probably not the right brush to use, but it's the brush that I had in hand. And so it's basically blue, brown, a little bit of green, and just a touch of white. And it's some greens that kind of infiltrate in here. It's kind of picking with too small of a brush, just in my opinion.
Betsy wants to know what your thoughts are on Kamar spray.
I haven't used it I used to use it. I haven't used it for a long time. I may start using it again now that I can't find my my beloved quick dry. Really, really disappointed that and I'm not sure why, if they discontinued it unless they found there was a problem. I certainly didn't have a problem. I've used it ever since it's come out, and it's worked wonderfully. So the Kamar, like I said, I used to use it. I don't now, but I may go back to it. I don't like some of this stuff up in here. It's just, what I do, this is where you take and you start pushing paint, pushing it that way. Oh, I like that way. You get just for the effects. There's some nice, that's the best weeds I've done right there. Wouldn't you know, I do them right at the end. Just different kinds of marks. That's all. That's all you're looking for. Everything that you paint in a painting, and when you switch from one subject in your painting to another, has a different characteristic. And if you can find a way to use a different brush to create that characteristic, more power to you. And like I say, if it isn't working, try something else. Well, I can leave you with that one. That's part of those are my words of wisdom for today. If it's not working, try something else. It sounds facetious, but there's a lot of truth in that statement. I could build on this all day. I could just see, every time I look back, I see more interesting, subtle color variations that I could play with. And it's part of the fun part of painting is discovery. As you're painting, you discover things that you're painting. All of a sudden you go, oh, look at that. Now I can, oh man. And so we clean that edge up, see? That's what I was, oh, a little. Got a little dirt on it, and that's how come we end up with that little. But if you just go back. Now, sometimes I did some of this with a liner, but truthfully, sometimes it's good to take a little bit too big of a brush and try and paint some of that in. And if you mess it up, go back to your liner. A line that was given to me by Don Putman. If you can, do it with a larger brush.
Saves time.
If you can't, go back and use your little safety valve brush, but try and do it with as large of a brush as you can. Okay, we're about done. I may do some touch-ups on this before I post it, but not many. It's got, it's got kind of the effect I was looking for. I can see more barn coming through back in here, so I could paint some negatives and let the barn come through a little bit more. But it gives you pretty much the feeling of pretty much what I was aiming for. I can always find other things that I could make better. I see them as I look. I see right in here more brights. And so I take that big old brush and put them in here. Oh, you ought to bring Jude in.
It's a little fussy right now.
Jude, come on in. Oh, he's fussy. Too bad.
There you go.
So you guys get the feeling. Now, for my taste, I could cool that barn off more. These are standing out a little too much. But the effect, I like the warm as it moves over. I think that part came out well. I think I'm too dark on that tree, but it isn't terrible. The little pieces of red coming through are wonderful. I wouldn't mind even sneaking more of those in. That somewhere back in here, just to kind of get some beautiful variations of warms to cools, cools to warms, that kind of thing going on. Anyway, I'm going to take a break. Hopefully you guys have a good day. Happy Halloween. I was going to do a pumpkin, but we did this instead. Okay. See you next week. Happy painting, everyone.
Thanks again for joining. All right. Thanks, Judy.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.